Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. It's not that hard, Bai Xiaochun said proudly, looking at the one-colored flame. Conjuring flame and concocting medicine really were similar in a lot of ways. Although the specific techniques were different, there were plenty of commonalities. For example, when conjuring flame, one mixed together certain types of souls, and then made adjustments based on the subsequent transformations. The main difficulty lay in the fact that all the adjustments needed to be made in one fell swoop, when the souls were crushed together into the palm. The slightest mistake at that point would lead to a failure. Of course, the process also required the use of one's cultivation base. Both spiritual power and soul power counted as energy of heaven and earth, and were a required element. To a novice, all of those different factors would require time to get used to. But Bai Xiaochun's first failure had only been because he didn't make the proper adjustments in the necessary moment. Afterward, he had analyzed the situation, and then decided to simply think of the souls as medicinal plants with unique properties, his hand as the pill furnace, and his spiritual power as the fire to heat the furnace. After that, everything became clear. Therefore, he succeeded on his second try. The sight of the one-colored flame in his hand got him very excited, as if a huge door had been opened, leading to a new road to follow. Necromancers are like the direct descendants of heaven and earth. And I'm a necromancer. He laughed heartily, aware that his ability to conjure one-colored flame made him an initiate necromancer in the wildlands. Next up, two-colored flame. Eyes glittering, he produced some more souls from his bag of holding, then followed the formula. Treating the souls like medicinal plants, he combined them according to the required ratios, adjusted his spiritual power, and then closed his hand over the souls to act as the pill furnace. It might have seemed complicated, but Bai Xiaochun had been concocting medicine for years, and was very familiar with such tasks. His eyes shone as he immersed himself in his work, and soon, the one-colored flame and the various souls combined, and a second color appeared within the flames. Zhou Yixing couldn't help but rise to a sitting position, his eyes wider than ever as he stared at the two-colored flame forming in Bai Xiaochun's palm. He almost couldn't believe what he was seeing. Impossible. It took me a full 3 years to succeed at conjuring two-colored flame. Zhou Yixing almost looked like he'd seen a ghost, and the disappointment in his heart was very uncomfortable. Well, it's not like it's that amazing. It's just two-colored flame, right? Not really a big deal. This Bai guy is just really lucky, that's all. Even as Zhou Yixing stewed in his irritation, the two-colored flame finished forming. However, things weren't over yet. Bai Xiaochun pulled out some more souls, roughly 50 this time, and used what seemed to be an even more complicated method to feed them into the two-colored flame. Gradually, a third color appeared, and he had a three-colored flame. Bai Xiaochun didn't seem very impressed with the three-colored flame. Without even pausing, he waved his sleeve to produce a few hundred vengeful souls. Then, eyes glittering, he fed the souls into the three-colored flame, which roiled like a sea of fire. Although it seemed like he was simply throwing them in, he actually put them in according to a very specific order, making adjustments the entire time. However, the overall process happened in a flash. A moment later, the sea of fire shrank back down into a tongue of flame, this time, with 4 colors. How is this possible? Zhou Yixing exclaimed inwardly, his eyes wider than before as he stared at the 4-colored flame. Before, he had chalked everything up to luck, but by now, he couldn't continue to convince himself that it was mere chance. The fact that Bai Xiaochun had produced 4-colored flame in almost one smooth action indicated to Zhou Yixing that he was actually dealing with a journeyman necromancer. However, everything was happening so quickly that Zhou Yixing began to wonder if this was someone from his clan that he didn't know. But he quickly quashed the idea. Glaring at Bai Xiaochun, he gritted his teeth, unable to conceal the envy which flickered in his eyes. I refuse to believe that this guy is really this amazing. That's nothing but a trifling 4-colored flame. There's no way he's going to be able to conjure a 5-colored flame using Zhou clan techniques. After all, when trying to conjure 5-colored flame, there is an extremely difficult factor that most people, before he could finish that thought, Bai Xiaochun produced over 1,000 vengeful souls, combined them, and fed them into the 4-colored flame. The flame danced wildly as though it were about to wink out, and yet, Bai Xiaochun somberly closed his hand over it. Then, moments later, he opened his fist to reveal a 5th color. Zhou Yixing was struck numb, and his scalp started tingling madly. I don't care how amazing his guy is, there's no way he can conjure 9-colored flame. He can't. I don't care how awesome he thinks he is, or how talented, he still needs time to stabilize the flame. Bai Xiaochun had no way of knowing that Zhou Yixing was virtually going crazy. Had he known, he would have been very pleased, but at the moment, he was fully focused on the five-colored flame in his palm. Instead of continuing on to try to conjure more flames, he spent time pondering why the five-colored flame had almost winked out earlier. After a bit of time passed, he reached a conclusion. There was a conflict with the soul ingredients. The formula isn't perfect. When five-colored flame forms, some of the souls clash with each other. If the disturbance is contained, the flame is conjured. If not, then it's a failure. So, it seems that I can't really trust the formulas after all. After some more thought, he proceeded to try to conjure six-colored flame, and did just as the formula required, which was produce 3,000 souls. Generally speaking, it was very important to maintain the proper ratio of souls, and also mix them together at the right time. For many journeyman necromancers, that was a very difficult thing to do, but for Bai Xiaochun, it was a simple thing, even with 3,000 souls. Before long, the 3,000 souls were all arranged and adjusted properly, and were pouring into the five-colored flame. Before long, he had his six-colored flame. Next was seven-colored flame. By this point, Zhou Yixing couldn't have been any more shocked, and was in fact racked with feelings of intense jealousy, and at the same time, despair. It was simply impossible for him to imagine how someone could be so talented that they could use his clan's flame formulas to conjure everything up to a seven-colored flame in one single session. It was simply inhuman. What was even more amazing was that Zhou Yixing had been the one to tell him the formulas, and yet, hadn't mentioned the most important things to pay attention to. One example was how important it was to contain the disturbances that arose in five-colored flame. And yet, despite leaving such things out, this necromancer Bai had figured everything out on his own. Zhou Yixing couldn't help but be a bit terrified. When eight-colored flame appeared in Bai Xiaochun's palm, Zhou Yixing felt a bit numb, and simply stared in shock, unsure if he was seeing things or not. But then, rumbling sounds echoed out as a nine-colored flame appeared, and Zhou Yixing shrieked involuntarily. Leaping to his feet, he pointed at Bai Xiaochun, his face as ashen as if he had just seen a ghost, his heart filled with such astonishment that he was about to faint. This is impossible. Zhou Yixing shrieked hysterically. It's simply impossible. You failed on your first try at one-colored flame, but after that, succeeded with everything up to nine-colored flame. I don't know a single master necromancer who would dare to claim to be able to do that. Only terrestrial necromancers are capable of such a thing. Just who exactly are you? The miraculous performance he had just witnessed seemed unbelievably preposterous. Bai Xiaochun frowned at being interrupted, and looked over at Zhou Yixing with an angry glare. Of course, at the same time, he was feeling very pleased at having just conjured nine-colored flame. Pipe down, he said in his best imitation of someone from the senior generation. Trying to suppress his excitement at having a nine-colored flame in his palm, he calmed himself and pulled out 30,000 souls. Then he opened his fingers, allowing the nine-colored flame to transform into a sea of fire. Carefully arranging the 30,000 souls, and pouring in his spiritual power in just the right way, he began to feed the souls into the fire. Some went in alone, others in groups of 3 to 5. Before long, they were all inside. Of course, the speed at which he did all of that defied description. Within about 10 breaths of time, the souls were merged into the fire, whereupon Bai Xiaochun extended his hand and closed his fist. Rumble. His hand became like a black hole that sucked in all the surrounding flame. Then, when he opened his fingers, he saw a 10-colored flame. The instant the 10-colored flame appeared, the entire cave was illuminated by brightly colored light. In fact, the light even pierced through the walls of the cave, making the entire mountain light up brightly. An intensely strong pressure emanated out from the flame, causing Bai Xiaochun's eyes to go wide with excitement. He even started to tremble visibly. I did it. I concocted 10-colored flame. He even felt more excited about personally conjuring multicolored flame than he usually did when concocting medicine. In contrast to Bai Xiaochun's excitement, Zhou Yixing's mind was struck as if by lightning. He simply stood there gaping, his thoughts wiped clean by the sight of the 10-colored flame. He wanted to believe that he was simply hallucinating, but unfortunately, wasn't able to fool himself in such a way. He had just witnessed his own clan's formulas used to conjure everything from 1 to 10-colored flame. It was a matter that had already turned his world upside down. Back home, even patriarchs who were terrestrial necromancers wouldn't be able to do such a thing. Even more shocking was that this necromancer had only just learned his clan's formulas. Despite that, he had still succeeded, something that left Zhou Yixing feeling completely lost. This is impossible, impossible. How could this be happening? His face was as white as a sheet of paper as he muttered crazily to himself. It was a huge blow to him, after all, and when he compared himself to this necromancer Bai, he couldn't help but feel like he himself was little more than trash. Inhuman. He's really and truly inhuman. Disappointment surged through him, washing away the jealousy from before. The difference between him and this necromancer was like the difference between the clouds and the mud beneath them. He didn't even qualify to be jealous. 10-colored flame marked the absolute peak of the master necromancer rank. In all of the wildlands, the number of necromancers who could conjure 10-colored flame was very limited. Any person like that was capable of dominating the field virtually anywhere they went. Master necromancers at the peak of their level could attract other large numbers of soul cultivator followers. Furthermore, considering that they could conjure 10-colored flame, when they made soul medicine, it would be considered level 10 low-grade soul medicine. Most necromancers welcomed soul cultivator followers. After all, it took a lot of souls to conjure flame. For example, 10-colored flame required 30,000 vengeful souls. For a necromancer to get all those souls single-handedly would be quite troublesome. Therefore, having followers to help was the natural way of things. Although, not all necromancers liked having followers. A few of them liked to do things on their own for various reasons. In terms of getting souls, it was also possible to go to the cities of the kings, or the necromancer clans, and trade soul medicine for what they needed. In any case, necromancers who reached the master rank were generally well known if not famous. If destiny was on their side, they could achieve a heaven-shaking, earth-toppling advance and become terrestrial necromancers. Terrestrial necromancers were even more famous, and were high above master necromancers in terms of standing. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath as he tore his gaze away from the 10-colored flame to look over at Zhou Yixing. When their eyes met, all of Zhou Yixing's pride and defiance crumbled, completely destroyed by the 10-colored flame. Mumbling bitterly, he didn't even dare to hold Bai Xiaochun's gaze. Bai Xiaochun's heart thumped happily. Clearly, it would be much easier to get Zhou Yixing to do what he said in the future. Well, since I've already scared him this much, I might as well keep going. I bet that when I conjure an 11-colored flame and become a terrestrial necromancer, Zhou Yixing will be so shocked he'll end up half dead. Filled with anticipation, Bai Xiaochun chuckled darkly to himself and then pulled out the jade slip with the information about the flame formulas. Even as Zhou Yixing stood there watching, he reviewed the 11-colored flame formula. Zhou Yixing hesitated for a moment, then whispered, "Fellow Daoist Bai, there's a big difference between 10-colored flame and 11-colored. You just sit quietly and watch," Bai Xiaochun interrupted proudly. His previous 10 successes left him feeling very confident. From what he could tell, conjuring flame was actually a very simple matter. The way Bai Xiaochun responded to Zhou Yixing caused his heart to begin to pound. The truth was that if he could actually personally witness an 11-colored flame being conjured, it would be a good thing for him. That was especially true considering that the techniques being used were his own clan's. To Zhou Yixing, it would be almost the same as watching one of his clan's patriarchs conjuring flame. Zhou Yixing sucked in a breath and sat there stock still, gaze fixed on Bai Xiaochun's hand. Bai Xiaochun was very pleased by Zhou Yixing's reaction. Making sure to look very impressive, he contemplated the formula for 11-colored flame, then slapped his bag of holding to produce 60,000 vengeful souls, which erupted like a tempest into the cave. Then, he waved his right hand and sent the souls into the fire. After about 10 breaths of time passed, his expression flickered. Although he was able to control the way the 60,000 souls merged together, as they poured into the 10-colored flame, he realized that an unforeseen transformation was underway. The pressure of the flame power was too intense. Bai Xiaochun wasn't too familiar with the fluctuations of flame conjuring, but could clearly sense them. Not good. Bai Xiaochun's face fell. Losing control of even one of the souls meant losing control of the entire 10-colored flame. The souls suddenly all poured into the fire at the same time, causing the flame to flicker wildly. Then, a popping sound could be heard, as the flame winked out. A green wisp of smoke rose up and then faded away. Bai Xiaochun's jaw dropped, and Zhou Yixing was equally stunned. Bai Xiaochun's breath caught in his throat. To have just finished bragging only to fail dramatically caused his face to burn as if with fire. Roaring angrily, he slapped his bag of holding to produce more souls, and then began to conjure flame, starting from the 1-colored variety and going all the way back up to 10. Then he stared at the 10-colored flame and reviewed everything that he had done so far, and then started another attempt at 11-colored flame. Soon, rumbling sounds could be heard as he failed again. I refuse to believe that I can't succeed. Bai Xiaochun furiously smacked his back of holding, only to realize that he was running out of souls. Then he slowly looked over to Zhou Yixing, who had recovered from his earlier shock and was staring at Bai Xiaochun with a strange expression on his face. Feeling both humiliated and even more angered, Bai Xiaochun said, "What are you looking at? Go get me some more souls. If you don't come back with at least 100,000, then don't come back." Giving Zhou Yixing one last good glare, he waved his sleeve, sending him flying out of the cave. Once outside, Zhou Yixing gnashed his teeth in anger at the domineering ways of this necromancer Bai. Clearly, he just wasn't skilled enough to conjure 11-colored flame, and Zhou Yixing had even tried to warn him. Not only had he ignored him, but he had even started bragging. Then when he failed, he vented his anger on Zhou Yixing. Chuckling coldly, he said, "HMPH. You really think it's that simple to become a terrestrial necromancer?" Unfortunately, because of the restrictive spells Bai Xiaochun had placed on his cultivation base, he had no choice other than to follow orders and go catch some souls. Unfortunately, Bai Xiaochun's clone had already captured all of the nearby souls, so no matter where he searched in the area, he couldn't find a single one. Gritting his teeth, he expanded his search. As he walked along, evening began to fall. At the same time, dark clouds filled the sky, and rain began to fall, rain that was acrid in odor and hurt when it touched his skin. Occasionally, green bolts of lightning would crackle across the sky above. At any other time, Zhou Yixing would simply have rotated his cultivation base and ignored the rain. But having 95% of it sealed, he was forced to endure it in misery and cursing. "I hate people named Bai. If only the Hell Emperor would notice what was happening, send down a bolt of hell lightning and wipe that guy off the map." After sending Zhou Yixing out to hunt for souls, Bai Xiaochun sent his 3 clones out to do the same thing, except that he told them to search in the jungle. His clones had the same cultivation base as he did, and were also equipped with soul convergence pills, which made things a bit easier for them than it was for Zhou Yixing. As for Bai Xiaochun himself, he sat there silently, analyzing his previous failures and working on some more conjurings. 1 day, 2 days, 3. Soon, 7 days had gone by, and Bai Xiaochun had successfully conjured more than 10 tongues of 10-colored flame. However, he hadn't been able to push a single one to the 11-colored level. Every time, he met with failure. As his fury and humiliation grew, his eyes became more bloodshot. His hair was disheveled, and he seemed bedeviled as he madly tried to determine the reason for his failure. As more time passed, he began to change the formula he was using for 11-colored flame, even though he didn't realize it. Thanks to the changes, his skill in flame conjuring advanced steadily. However, he continued to face difficulties at every turn, the reason being that there was actually a bottleneck between 10 and 11-colored flame. Not only did one need to adjust the formula, but one also had to have perfect control over 10-colored flame. Days passed, and Bai Xiaochun continued to descend into a state of bedevilment. As Bai Xiaochun went about his flame conjuring, 8 days went by. Meanwhile, some distance away, Zhou Yixing was flying along through the air, his hair disheveled, coughing up blood. Chasing him was a group of more than 100 savage giants. "You people push things too far." Zhou Yixing howled in frustration. Bai Xiaochun had asked him to bring back 100,000 souls, but with his cultivation base sealed, that was an almost impossible task. Although he was actually in late core formation, he had never recovered completely from the labyrinth, and that meant that the 5% of his cultivation base he had access to gave him battle prowess roughly equivalent to early foundation establishment. At one point, he had considered taking advantage of his relative freedom to flee. However, he soon discovered that if he went too far away from Bai Xiaochun, the restrictive spell inside of him would begin to show signs of detonation. As such, he had no choice but to abandon such thoughts of fleeing, and continue to curse Bai Xiaochun even more than before. At one point, he realized that he was being stalked, or perhaps even hunted. Just when he had turned to flee, he found that a group of savage giants had appeared to block his path. He fought and killed some, but their numbers continued to grow until he was virtually surrounded. As of that moment, he realized that he was like a weak animal being assaulted by vicious predators. Because of the dangerous crisis, he finally resorted to using a secret magic to break free, something that drained him of some of his life force but gave him a huge burst of speed. Unfortunately, his use of the secret magic only got the savage giants more interested in him, and they began to dog him relentlessly. Zhou Yixing couldn't have been more frustrated. If his cultivation base wasn't sealed, then he would never have let these foundation establishment giants off the hook. He would have cut them all down with a mere thought. But now, his soul power was sealed, and most of his magical techniques were unusable. The predicament had tears leaking out of his eyes as he realized that if the giants caught him, he would definitely die. "I'm a master necromancer," he shouted. "How dare you do this to me?" Even as Zhou Yixing's voice rang out, two soul blades suddenly screamed through the air toward him, a powerful attack that slammed into him and sent him staggering to the side, coughing up blood. The more than 100 savages behind him were all completely focused on chasing him, and there were even two soul cultivators with them, who were eyeing Zhou Yixing as if he were some sort of treasure. However, once they heard him call himself a master necromancer, their expressions flickered with hesitation. A similar reaction could be seen among the savages. "Necromancer?" one of the soul cultivators said. "His soul power fluctuations are weak, so even if he's a necromancer, we should still be able to take him. But what if he's hiding his true cultivation base level? What if he's really in core formation, but injured? That means that if we don't kill him now, we could be bringing a huge disaster on us in the future." After a long moment of hesitation, the two soul cultivators exchanged a glance, and then one of them called out, "If you're really a master necromancer, then make some 7-colored flame. Then we'll believe you. In fact, we'll even offer an apology and give you some gifts of compensation." Zhou Yixing was instantly more frustrated than before. He had no 7-colored flame on him, and because his cultivation base was sealed, he couldn't conjure any. Having no way to prove who he was, he simply roared in fury and then used his secret magic to flee again. To see Zhou Yixing flee actually left the two soul cultivators feeling quite relieved. How dare he impersonate a necromancer? He can't get far. Chase him down. If we kill him, the current crisis our Black Mountain tribe is facing can be solved. Besides, he's injured and only in the foundation establishment stage. He's a gift from the Hell Emperor to our Black Mountain tribe to help us pass this difficult time. With that, they began to chase after him again. The chase continued, with Zhou Yixing using all the power he could muster to flee. Soon, he was so angry and tired that he felt like he was going to explode. "I hate people named Bai," he cursed inwardly. "Everyone in the world named Bai is on my hate list now." I kindly told him that 11-colored flame was very hard to summon. If he wanted to ignore my warning, fine, but why did he have to get so angry when he failed? If it weren't for him getting pissed off and forcing me to go find souls, I would never be in this situation. More and more enemies were joining the chase, giving the infuriated Zhou Yixing no other choice than to continue to use his secret magic to race back toward Bai Xiaochun in the cave, coughing up blood the entire time. This was a day that Zhou Yixing would never be able to forget for his entire life. Only by repeatedly drawing on his life force to fuel his secret magic was he able to stay alive. By now, some of his hair was turning white, revealing the true price he was paying to flee. Eventually, he caught sight of the barren mountain where Bai Xiaochun was located. Never could he have imagined that he would be so overjoyed at the prospect of returning. Tears leaking out of his eyes, he looked back at his pursuers and shouted, "You people just wait." The two soul cultivators, and the giants they led, got a bad feeling when they looked at the mountain that was Zhou Yixing's destination, but didn't stop chasing him. The soul cultivators even gritted their teeth and performed incantation gestures to unleash a joint soul power attack. Instantly, two soul blades appeared, each one a dozen meters long or more. Even as they appeared, they fused together, becoming a 30-meter-long weapon. At the same time, the savages howled in fury, causing streams of chi and blood to erupt from their bodies, a black mist that merged with the soul blade, causing it to grow even larger. By this point, it was fully 150 meters long as it slashed toward Zhou Yixing. As a result, the two soul cultivators were significantly drained, and the more than 100 savages all had ashen faces. And yet, they were looking toward Zhou Yixing with keen anticipation. "Tribal secret magic," Zhou Yixing exclaimed, shocked. Racked with anxiety, he coughed up 8 mouthfuls of blood as he again unleashed his secret magic, narrowly staying ahead of the soul blade as he shot toward the mountain. "Help me, fellow Daoist Bai," he shouted. At the same time, the 150-meter-long soul blade bore down on both Zhou Yixing and the mountain itself, clearly moments away from reducing everything to dust. Bai Xiaochun's 3 clones were still out collecting souls, so his true self sat alone inside the cave on top of the mountain. Currently, a vicious expression could be seen on his face, his hair was wildly disheveled, and his eyes were completely bloodshot, as if with madness. Right in the middle of his palm was a tongue of 10-colored flame, into which he was feeding a seemingly endless stream of vengeful souls. He was completely and utterly focused, and didn't dare to allow himself to be distracted. His eyes were bloodshot, and he didn't even know how much time had passed. All he knew was that his repeated failures had come at incredible cost. Because of all that, he had no idea what was happening outside the cave. This time it's definitely going to work. It has to. The 10-colored flame gobbled up all the souls, and an 11th color was just about to appear in the flames, when all of a sudden, the flame destabilized. Bai Xiaochun's face fell, and he quickly performed an incantation gesture with his left hand and then pushed his finger into the flame. However, the flame only flickered more wildly, and then powerful fluctuations began to roll out of it that caused Bai Xiaochun's expression to flicker. It was in that moment that Zhou Yixing's scream reached his ears, as did the howling of the more than 100 savage giants. Then, all such sounds were drowned out by the massive explosion which occurred when the 10-colored flame completely destabilized and detonated. Shrieking, Bai Xiaochun shot backward, pulling out his eternal parasol to protect himself as the entire mountain shook violently. Before the soul blade could even reach the mountain, the top blew off, and massive flames shot out in all directions. Flaming rubble and even lava spewed out, completely destroying the soul blade as if it had never even existed. Everything was happening too quickly. Whether it was Zhou Yixing or his pursuers, none of them even had a chance to react before the entire mountain in front of them erupted like a volcano. The way the mountain collapsed, even to the point where lava was streaming out of it, made them feel as if they were suddenly facing some vicious monster. Shrieking, everyone began to back up. Thankfully, the flame and lava didn't shoot out very far, and soon began to fade away. Zhou Yixing had been blackened a bit, and that was even after he had shot backward at full speed for fear of being incinerated. Everyone was completely shocked, and all hearts began to pound in astonishment. It was then that an enraged voice echoed out from within the remaining sea of flames. "How dare you people! I can't believe you would actually interrupt my flame conjuring." Even as the fury of the words continued to float in the air, the last of the fire faded away, and Bai Xiaochun appeared, a very unsightly expression on his face as he strode forward. His robes were in tatters, but the rage in his heart couldn't have been more intense. He had been absolutely convinced that he was about to succeed, and was sure that the only reason he had failed was because he had been interrupted. As soon as his bloodshot eyes caught sight of the savages and soul cultivators, Bai Xiaochun slapped his bag of holding to produce a 7-colored flame. A master necromancer. As soon as the savages saw the 7-colored flame, they began to instinctively tremble and pant in fear. As for the 2 soul cultivators, they were in the great circle of foundation establishment, but even they were staring at Bai Xiaochun with pale-faced astonishment. They knew that 7-colored flame was the hallmark of master necromancers, and that people such as that were the type who could gather large groups of soul cultivator followers. Furthermore, it was now obvious that the person they were chasing must be the follower of this master necromancer. Not only had they tried to kill the follower of a master necromancer, but they had interrupted that very master necromancer when he was conjuring flame. The 2 soul cultivators, who were already sweating profusely, then noticed how bloodshot Bai Xiaochun's eyes were, and that he was clearly enraged. Immediately, they clasped hands and bowed deeply. "Please quell your anger, Master Necromancer. We really didn't know that you were here conjuring flame, Master Necromancer. Please, quell your anger. We can offer compensation." After hearing the soul cultivators' trembling words, and seeing them bowing, the savages behind them all dropped down to kowtow. When Bai Xiaochun saw all of that, his fury began to subside. After all, the interference during the critical moment of flame conjuring was not the main reason his 11-colored flame had failed. The biggest fault lay in his lack of control. Although he had solved all the previous problems he had encountered, a new problem had suddenly arisen, which led to the explosion moments ago that had shocked even him. There were obviously some internal instabilities. But there were instabilities before, and never such an explosion. Muttering thoughtfully to himself, he pondered the situation in search of an answer. Meanwhile, the 2 panicked soul cultivators offered profuse apologies. However, then they considered the crisis their tribe was facing, and suddenly exchanged a glance. "Grandmaster," one of them said, "now that your immortals cave is destroyed, could it be that you are temporarily without a place of residence? If so, why not come to our tribe to rest up a bit?" Bai Xiaochun glanced back at the destroyed mountain cave, and then nodded. What he needed right now was exactly that, a quiet place to analyze the problem with the 11-colored flame. Considering how the soul cultivators and the savages were treating him, Bai Xiaochun finally understood what kind of a position necromancers occupied in the wildlands. It was definitely beyond anything he had imagined before. Off to the side, Zhou Yixing was stewing in his own anger. After all, he had mentioned that he was a master necromancer, and yet the savages and soul cultivators had refused to believe him. Soon, the soul cultivators and savages were cautiously leading Bai Xiaochun back to their tribe. It wasn't a very large tribe, with only about 1,000 members, who made their home in one of the local mountain valleys. The tribe was fortified, but in a very primitive fashion, with immortals' caves dug into the sides of the mountains. Bai Xiaochun was immediately treated as an honored guest, and was personally given immortals' cave that had previously belonged to one of the two soul cultivators. Even better, they constantly provided him tribute in the form of vengeful souls. There were other forms of compensation as well. Yet again, Bai Xiaochun was struck by how important necromancers were in the wildlands. Whenever he ran into any of the savage giants, they looked at him with a mixture of fear and respect. Bai Xiaochun was quite sure that if he asked them to, they would do anything he wanted. As for the two soul cultivators, they clearly respected and feared him, but at the same time, wanted something of him, although they seemed hesitant to speak of it openly. Everyone assumed that Zhou Yixing was one of Bai Xiaochun's followers, and therefore, they also treated him with great respect, and gave him handsome compensation, although not quite to the same level as Bai Xiaochun. After being in the tribe for only about half a month, his daily usage of souls ensured that the two soul cultivators couldn't prevent from gritting their teeth when they handed them over. Finally, Bai Xiaochun started to feel bad about it. The next time they came to deliver souls, he sighed and said, "All right, spit it out. What do you want my help with?" The two soul cultivators couldn't conceal their excitement. They had been holding back this entire time, so now that Bai Xiaochun took the initiative to bring up the subject, they exchanged a glance and then revealed the truth. 2 months before, the Hell Emperor had issued a proclamation indicating that he would be selecting a successor to receive his legacy. Very demanding qualifications had been put in place for the successor, and virtually everyone in the wildlands was going mad to prepare, including people in the City of the Kings, as well as the necromancer clans. There was a cultivation base limitation for those who could compete to become the successor, and for many, that meant that a vast quantity of soul medicine was needed to improve their cultivation base. As a result, the 3 great clans that lived under the control of Giant Ghost City were going all out in their preparations, which included issuing strict orders to the tribes in their respective areas of influence to provide large amounts of soul medicine. Any tribe who couldn't meet the requirement would face potential execution. Because of an event which had occurred recently, the Black Mountain tribe was particularly weak, and was temporarily incapable of producing any soul medicine. As a result, they had come up with 3 ways to solve the problem: sell other products produced in their tribe, find a necromancer to help them, or resort to banditry to try to get soul medicine. They were currently utilizing all 3 different options to try to escape from this disaster. Bai Xiaochun found the whole explanation a bit confusing. However, Zhou Yixing's eyes went wide. In fact, the news that the Hell Emperor was looking for a successor caused his eyes to shine with unprecedented brightness. Bai Xiaochun maintained a neutral expression, and managed to casually ask for some more details in a way that didn't reveal his lack of understanding. Of course, Zhou Yixing was so excited about the whole matter that he didn't notice that at all, and proceeded to tell Bai Xiaochun everything he knew. It was only at this point that Bai Xiaochun finally came to understand that, in addition to the Arch-Emperor from the Imperial City, there was also a Hell Emperor in the wildlands. There was a legend about the Hell Emperor which stated that after the first-generation Arch-Emperor died, his soul didn't vanish but instead, became the underworld river. It went on to control the aspect of death in the world, and was the spirit of the underworld river. That was the origin of the Hell Emperor. From generation to generation, the faith of the people ruled by the Arch-Emperor would bolster the Hell Emperor's strength. In fact, over the years, the savages had been influenced by the soul cultivators to the point where they also began to exercise faith in the Hell Emperor. Essentially, the Arch-Emperor was a physical leader who everyone could see, whereas the Hell Emperor was a symbolic luminary. Also, according to legend, the Hell Emperor's palace existed deep within the underworld river, which was where the Hell Emperor resided. Occasionally, he would send emissaries out into the world of the living, people who were always treated with the utmost respect, even by the reigning Arch-Emperor. 2 months before, the underworld river had appeared above the Imperial City, and a stone stele descended with a dharmic decree. According to that decree, a successor was to be chosen within one 60-year cycle, a successor who could become the next generation Hell Emperor. The wildlands were fully shaken. After all, this was the first time in countless years that there had ever even been mention of the Hell Emperor choosing a successor. All of the clans, marquis, and lords in the Imperial City, as well as the powerful forces in the 4 kingly cities and even other influential groups, were profoundly moved. Everyone wanted the Hell Emperor's successor to come from their group. 2 prerequisites had to be met to be a potential successor: first, to have a nascent soul cultivation base. Second, to officially acquire candidacy qualifications. Of the two requirements, the latter was the most important. After all, even in the wildlands, nascent soul cultivators were no rarity. That was especially the case because powerful necromancers could make soul medicine that gave them an advantage over the soul cultivators. For them, it was much easier to break through from core formation into the nascent soul stage. Therefore, the most difficult of the prerequisites was to gain candidacy qualifications. How do you get the candidacy qualifications? Zhou Yixing asked, looking very serious, his heart pounding in his chest. The matter of the Hell Emperor choosing a successor was a monumental one for the entire wildlands, so even Zhou Yixing, despite not having a nascent soul cultivation base at the moment, was still thinking of trying to join the competition. Bai Xiaochun sat there listening thoughtfully as the two soul cultivators explained everything they knew. After all, the matter was no secret. To get candidacy qualifications, said one of the soul cultivators, you have to be a necromancer. Most importantly, you must have performed at least a 5-fold spirit enhancement on your nascent soul. That's the only way to get candidacy qualifications. As soon as Zhou Yixing heard this explanation, his face fell. How are you supposed to do that? Nascent soul spirit enhancement is a high-level skill, legendary even among necromancers. It's true that doing such a thing can lead to explosively quick cultivation progress, and also incredible power. But, very few people can even attempt to do such a thing. And a 5-fold enhancement, isn't that courting death? Bai Xiaochun's eyes glittered brightly. He had never heard of anything like this before. The idea of performing a spirit enhancement on one's own nascent soul seemed unimaginable, and also incredibly difficult. After all, there was always the chance of a spirit enhancement failing, and that probability would increase with each enhancement from the 1st to the 5th. If an enhancement on a magical item failed, then the item would be destroyed, but if an enhancement on one's own nascent soul failed, then presumably, the outcome would be the same. A failure leading to the destruction of one's nascent soul would result in being obliterated from existence. Not very many people would dare to attempt such a thing. Bai Xiaochun was shocked, and at the same time, realized why Zhou Yixing's face had drained of blood. Obviously, the only people who would make such an attempt would either be supremely self-confident, or utterly crazy. That's definitely the requirement, said the soul cultivator. Even still, the chance to become the successor of the Hell Emperor has already got many nascent soul experts preparing to compete. Don't forget that in Arch-Emperor City, there is that mysterious stone steel that came from the underworld river itself. Supposedly, it can sense if anyone in the wildlands comes close to meeting the two prerequisites, and will then list their names publicly, showing how many spirit enhancements have been performed on their nascent soul. The name list on that stone steel is right out in the open for everyone to see. I heard that the names of 7 or 8 chosen nascent soul experts are already there. After a 60-year cycle passes, whoever occupies the first-place spot on that stone steel will become the successor of the Hell Emperor. After hearing this next set of information, Zhou Yixing's ambitions were instantly crushed. The entire thing seemed completely insane. The idea of performing 5 spirit enhancements on his nascent soul seemed more like trying to play chicken with death 5 times in a row. On the other hand, Bai Xiaochun blinked and said, a 5-fold spirit enhancement on your nascent soul? That doesn't seem very hard. Not very hard? Zhou Yixing blurted, staring at Bai Xiaochun with wide eyes, clearly having forgotten his place for the moment. By now, Zhou Yixing was convinced that there was no way he could ever participate in a competition like this, and his excitement from before began to wane. Even if you think a 5-fold spirit enhancement isn't hard, he said tartly, do you really think that all you have to do to stay in first place is that? The nascent soul chosen are definitely going to be fighting it out to the last man. The 5-fold spirit enhancement is just the beginning. If you want to get into first place and stay there, you'll probably have to perform more spirit enhancements than that. When the time comes, think about the fact that all of the chosen in the competition will come from powerful organizations and groups. 5 definitely won't be the limit. I bet we'll see 7 or even 8-fold enhancements. You know, there's even a legend that if you can perform a 15-fold spirit enhancement on your nascent soul, you can break through into the mid-nascent soul stage. An 18-fold enhancement will get you into the late nascent soul stage. A 20-fold enhancement is the Great Circle. There probably isn't even a need to mention the legendary realm of a 21-fold spirit-enhanced nascent soul, which is guaranteed to push you into the Diva realm. But who would possibly dare to attempt such a thing? By this point he realized that he had just spoken a bit impetuously, and his heart began to pound. Worried that he might have pushed the boundaries too far, he said, it's definitely a dead end. Literally. Besides, if you want to fuse with heaven and earth and reach the Diva realm, you can also use 15-fold spirit-enhanced magical items. Although there's always a chance of failure using that method, it's still a much more stable path to take. An imperceptible flicker of light ran through Bai Xiaochun's eyes as he suddenly came to a deeper understanding of how wildlander necromancers became devas. For one thing, it had to do with the ranking of the necromancer in question. After all, the requirement to make a cultivation-based breakthrough in such a fashion was to perform a 15-fold spirit enhancement on a magical item, and to fuse with heaven and earth. And only celestial necromancers could conjure 15-colored flame. It seems that everything in the wildlands has to do with necromancers. Necromancers could progress their cultivation by performing spirit enhancements on their nascent soul. However, it was a path in which one step could lead to the heavens, but a misstep could lead to the 9 Serenities underworld. Life or death would be determined in the briefest of moments. At least, that was how it would be for most people. As for Bai Xiaochun, his heart was already racing madly as he contemplated his turtle walk and its spirit enhancement abilities. If I ever reach the nascent soul stage one day, then maybe I can use my turtle walk to advance my cultivation base by leaps and bounds. In fact, it might not even be impossible to become a diva. Of course, he knew that such matters were for the distant future. Right now, the most important thing was to get back to the Great Wall, and also, get more diva souls. He had already formed 3 Diva Soul clones, which meant that he couldn't achieve cultivation-based breakthroughs with Diva Beast souls anymore. The only option he had now was to find Metal and Earth-type Diva souls. The more he thought about Diva souls, the more anxious he got. By this point, the 2 soul cultivators had finished all of their explanations. Looking at Bai Xiaochun with pleading eyes, they clasped hands and bowed. Exalted One, the entire wildlands has been shaken by this matter recently. Whether it's the princes in the imperial city, or the chosen from the cities of the kings, or the necromancer clans, they've all gone crazy. They're using every method they can think of to fight for the chance to become the successor of the Hell Emperor. It's the same in Giant Ghost City. Not only is the city itself demanding large amounts of soul medicine, the 3 great necromancer clans are also doing the same thing in the hopes of improving the cultivation bases of their clan members. Because of that, the taxes have been raised very high recently. In fact, the orders only came down recently that our soul medicine tribute requirement had been more than doubled. Our Black Mountain tribe really can't meet the requirement, so we had no choice but to try to think of some other way to pay up. The more they talked, the more the Black Mountain tribe soul cultivators seemed to sink into despondency. Grandmaster Bai, we beg of you to help us. If you can concoct 500 portions of low-grade soul medicine for us, we would be more than willing to pay a soul-hoarding pagoda in exchange. The 2 soul cultivators clasped hands and bowed deeply, and then one of them pulled a small gray pagoda out of his garment and respectfully held it out toward Bai Xiaochun. A gray mist pulsed out of the little pagoda, completely surrounding it and making it difficult to see it clearly. At the same time, it emanated a feeling of ancientness, as though it had existed since primeval times. The 5 levels of the pagoda were all integrated smoothly, making it look more like a conical tower than a traditional pagoda. Even more surprising to Bai Xiaochun, he could sense the power of spatial magic within it, something very similar to bags of holding. Soul-hoarding pagoda, he murmured to himself. Although he had never seen a soul-hoarding pagoda before, at a single glance, he could tell that this was an item used in the wildlands to collect and hold vengeful souls. 1. If you put vengeful souls into a bag of holding, they would slowly deteriorate in much the same way that food would rot away if left out in the open. Only the legendary soul-hoarding pagodas could keep vengeful souls fresh indefinitely. As Bai Xiaochun examined the soul-hoarding pagoda, Zhou Yixing looked on enviously. Although soul-hoarding pagodas weren't exactly rare, they were still very valuable, and were highly prized by necromancers. As for this particular pagoda, it was clearly very well crafted, and very old. Although a 5-story soul-hoarding pagoda might not be anything particularly amazing to extremely powerful necromancers, to ordinary necromancers, they were like precious gems. However, to Bai Xiaochun, it seemed like little more than a bag of holding. What's so amazing about that? Zhou Yixing grumbled inwardly. I had one before too. And yet, he couldn't help but be a bit envious. His previous soul-hoarding pagoda, which had been gifted to him by his clan patriarch, only had 3 stories. Unfortunately, after being injured by Bai Xiaochun in the labyrinth, he had encountered another powerful enemy, and in the resulting fight, the pagoda had been destroyed. As Zhou Yixing stewed in his envy, Bai Xiaochun looked thoughtfully at the soul-hoarding pagoda. Then, his eyes flashed as if with lightning. Now I understand why I kept failing at conjuring 11 colored flame. 1. The Chinese character I'm translating as hoard is the same as the character in bag of holding. So it could also be a soul holding pagoda. Or conversely, you could change bags of holding to bags of hoarding. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.